The United States of America, was it formed by people voting? Elections came up and they voted really hard for the right people, and all of a sudden they had freedom. Well, good evening. Back again. Just got through working out. Thought I'd come up here and make another video. Even while I'm working out, I'm thinking of things. My mind just keeps running things over and over again in there. And I was thinking about something recently that I've experienced on my Facebook page from some friends of mine on Facebook. Now, when I say friends, understand we don't necessarily politically agree on things. So I see their point of view and they see mine. And I'm sure they think I'm out of my mind. That's okay. I think they're out of their minds. But one of the things I noticed was that some of the posts that they've made, some of the memes they've put up, have their snarky little comments and making fun of people who were protesting in Michigan and other places around the country about the lockdown and how they went to their state capitals armed, carrying long guns, rifles for the uninitiated. Some of them had handguns, that's fine, but they were carrying guns, and they went to their state capitals to make it clear to their governors that they didn't like the way things were going. Okay? Well, now you would expect liberals, because they don't like guns, and they don't like conservatives, and they don't like Republicans. Pretty much they don't like anybody that's not a liberal. So they started having a conniption, making fun of it. And these sort of things get me to thinking. Do they really understand what it is that they are saying or what it is they are upset about? One of the first things that comes to my mind is, how do they think this country was created? The United States of America. Was it formed by people voting? Elections came up and they voted really hard for the right people, and all of a sudden they had freedom. Yay. That's the way it works, right? You ask for it. If they don't give it to you right away, you beg for it. You plead. You lay down on the ground and beg. You grovel. And eventually you convince your rulers that they should give you your freedom. Isn't that how it works? Now, you and I know better. Those of us who have actually read a history book or three understand how governments and tyrants throughout history have worked. No people have ever become free or won their freedom by asking for it. Let's go to the United States of America and the American Civil War. Now, people can say what they want to about the causes of the war, and I would certainly be willing to argue with them about it. But a result of that war, whether it was the intended result or not, was the fact that slavery was over. It was ended. And it wasn't ended because the slaves had been asking for it. It wasn't ended because Frederick Douglass made great speeches. It wasn't even ended because Abraham Lincoln got elected. It was ended because the war was over, the North had won, and one of the conditions was slavery is over. We had to fight a war. We had to kill 600,000 or more Americans to achieve that. Didn't come from voting, didn't come from begging for it. Slaves had been asking for freedom for years prior to that. Hadn't happened. Abolitionists had been complaining, begging for it, demanding it for years prior to the war. Didn't happen. Think of any culture, any country, any people throughout history who have achieved freedom, and look at how it happened. I defy you. If you can find an example, please put it in the comments. Let me know what it is, where a people won their freedom simply by asking for it. Doesn't work that way. So the United States of America, For years, under the rule of King George III and his parliament, the United States was, the colonies were subjugated. They were treated unlike any other British subjects around the world. British subjects, believe it or not, actually had rights. They had a constitution, largely based on the Magna Carta. They were supposed to have representative government. But the United Colonies, I keep saying United States, forgive me, the colonies kept asking the king, this tax, no, it's wrong. This law, that's not right. It's taking American colonists over to Great Britain for trials if they break a law. How is any of this just? This is wrong, and you know it's wrong. It's wrong according to our Constitution. And King George, time after time after time, just told him to go pound sand. Sorry, I'm the king. I'm the one running this show, and you're going to do what I say to do. How long did that last? Maybe 10, 12 years before finally enough colonists came to realize, you know what? This isn't working. Then the British in Boston came out into the Massachusetts Bay countryside, specifically to go to Lexington and Concord because there were magazines there. Now, I'm not talking about the kind of magazines you read. I mean magazines where you store firearms and powder and ammunition. And they were going to confiscate those weapons. And the Massachusetts residents in the nearby area got together and said, no, you're not. That's not going to happen. And thus we have the shot heard around the world. And the war begins. And even after that, even after those shots were fired and British soldiers were killed and American colonists were killed, there were still Americans who hoped for peace with England. We want to be British subjects. We simply want the same rights that all other British subjects have. So time passes, and they're still sending messages to the king, seeking redress. Please, we want to come back into the fold. We want to be loyal British subjects, but you have to be a proper and just ruler. Nope, wasn't working out. So ultimately, a war was fought. People were killed. That's right. The American colonists became rebels. They became traitors. How dare you stand against the king? It's the law. He's the law. What he says goes. Now think about that comparison with people today who demand freedom here in America. What are they called? What kind of names do the liberals throw at them? I mean, guys, think about it. I know it's harsh truth. I know a lot of people don't want to think about these things. They'd rather label me and others like me who think this way crazy. But the fact is, this country was created from the maelstrom of war because the ruler, King George III, would have none of it. So we had to take our freedom. Okay? And moving forward. Just last year, it hasn't been, well, maybe it's been right at about a year now. We started hearing about protests in China. Citizens rising up against the Chinese government, seeking their freedom, seeking democratic governance like we have here in America. I mean, you saw the pictures, you saw the videos. Chinese citizens waving the American flag. Not the Chinese flag, not the communist flag, the American flag. Now, a lot of people here in America were supportive of this, not necessarily to the point of going to war on their behalf or sending them weapons to fight a war. But in spirit, many Americans were like, you go. You want your freedom? You got to fight for it. Now, the Chinese people didn't have weapons like we do. They don't have a Second Amendment. They don't have a founding class, as we did, that represented us and understood the need for an armed citizenry. Are you listening, liberals? This is why we have a Second Amendment. It's not to hunt deer. Get that? Yeah, just stop saying that. You sound stupid when you say it. Stop it. We have a Second Amendment so that we can stand up when we need to and say to the government, remember, we're the ones in charge here, not you. You work for us. We don't work for you. And if you keep pushing, we have the means to push back. We don't want to have to do that. We would prefer to peacefully resolve these issues. But if you keep pushing, we can and we will push back. So the fact that American citizens are arming themselves to protest, I see that as quintessentially American. But again, I know liberals, they think I'm crazy because I think that way, overlooking, of course, how this country was created, overlooking how any people throughout history have actually won their freedom. Now, how many of these liberals, and if you're watching this, if you see this video, I'm asking you liberals right now to tell me in the comments section, did you support the Chinese citizens who were fighting for their freedom? In spirit, if nothing else. Maybe you didn't send money, maybe you didn't write letters on their behalf, but in spirit, you were watching the videos on the news and going, yeah, good for them. Well, now imagine if those Chinese citizens had been armed as we Americans are. Do you think they might have at least come close? Maybe. Or at least made enough of an impact, enough of a point with the ruling communists that those communists would have to step back and go, this was just in Hong Kong and a couple of other provinces. If the entire country decided to rise up, we're going to be in trouble. Remember Tiananmen Square? I do. I'm old enough to have lived when that happened. A lot of young people today probably never even heard of Tiananmen Square. Remember the one lone Chinese man standing in front of a long line of tanks? You know that guy knew he was going to die that day. He may not get run over by that tank, but he was going to get arrested and he was going to be disappeared. Right? His family would never hear from him again. These Chinese protesters last year, do you think they didn't know what was going to happen to them? You think that their government was just going to slough it off and go, well, those crazy protesters, they're not going to get what they want. So just let them have their fun and we'll go back to business as usual. Think about the protests we've had here in America. January 20th at the state capitol about the Second Amendment. The recent ones we've had at the state capitol about the lockdown. People there were angry. People there were waving signs. People there were calling their government, their governor, an idiot. Now imagine if you did that in China. What do you think would happen? Imagine that. I want you to think about it. So when we get together as Americans to protest something and we're armed, I see that as American. That is about as American as you can get. And it says to the government very clearly, we are the ones running this country, not you. We elected you to represent us, not to rule over us. You need to understand the difference. And again, keep pushing and we can push back. Do you remember the pictures and the video of the Chinese students using bows and arrows or using slings? The slings like David used to slay Goliath. You put a rock in it, you fling it at somebody. That was their weapons. That, maybe some Molotov cocktails. While the Chinese police, of course, had guns and bombs, and not to even mention the tear gas and smoke grenades. So when you think about what freedom is and how freedom happens, I don't understand how you don't see that freedom comes from a people's willingness to stand up and fight for it. Whether it's in China, whether it's in Iran, Russia, and right here in the United States of America. We created this country through war. We had to fight for our freedom. People since then in our country and in other countries have had to fight for their freedom. It doesn't happen because you ask for it. So I want you to think about these things. Rather than making fun of these people because they feel the need to be armed to get a point across to our government, understand why they're doing that. Understand that you can only be nice for so long to people who are not being nice to you. Understand that we have rights, and when those rights are trampled on, we have the right to stand up and fight back. That's quintessential America. I don't know why you don't understand that. So rather than making fun of these people, rather than making your snarky comments, understand that the freedom we're fighting for, the freedom that we demand, is the freedom that applies to everybody in this country, even you liberals. You have the same rights and freedoms we do. I'm not going to try to take away your rights, and I expect you to leave my rights alone. See how that works? So I hope I've gotten my point across. Freedom has to be fought for sometimes. It's not going to be given to you. And we've had freedom in this country for a long time. We've had certain classes of people who have had to fight for a lot longer than others to get their freedom, and they have achieved it in large degree. There's still work to be done, to be sure. But we don't achieve that freedom, and we don't spread those rights around equally by taking rights away from one group of people and then saying that, well, this group over here has rights, and we demand that they be respected, but that group over there, they're crazy. They don't deserve any rights like the rest of us. Come on, guys, get with the program. I'll talk to you later. Bye.